All right, came out Monday morning, Ryan. The first coaches poll for the upcoming college football season, top 25, was dropped. No surprise, the first three involve Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. Michigan comes in at number 6, and our Michigan State Spartans come in at number 14.
I mean, it seems probably about right. I think when you get to the top 6 or you get to the top 5, right? And most of the time, those teams are going to be pretty much predictable. And then you get to anywhere between the next, honestly, 20 or 30 teams where you could look at a team who's number 8 and you can be like, oh my God, this team has so many flaws. This team at 20 should be above them. And you can do that with literally every single one of those teams. So at first glance for me, Michigan State at 14 seems high, but then you take into account it's a team that won 11 games last year. So they are going to get some respect, right? They won their bowl game as well. I think they finished number 10 after the bowl game. So the final ranking of the season. And you expect the offense to take a step back. Obviously, they lost Kenneth Walker. They lost Jalen Naylor. But they brought back Jaden Reed. They brought back who's going to be a senior quarterback now in Peyton Thorne. And everything about that is really good, right? You're like, okay, they got their best receiver. They got their quarterback. And an offensive line that wasn't very good. I guess returns some of its starters. But I still don't think people have a big high hope for them. And then you think the defense should be better, right? It was a defense that was really bad last year, especially the secondary. I think MSU's front 7 is going to be actually really good this year with some of the additions that they've made from the transfer portal, and that just by itself will help the secondary. And the secondary, while they did add Amir Speed from Georgia, you can't get any worse than what the Michigan State secondary was last year. And then for Michigan, it seems about right. There's still a bunch of question marks there. How are you going to replace Hutchinson and Ojabo? But it's a team that won the Big Ten, made the college football playoff last year. They too returned their quarterback, and their offense should be stacked. I mean, they're getting Ronnie Bell back, who was their best receiver last year, and they lost him, I think, in the first game of the season, first or second game. And then they're bringing back Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards in the running game. And then, obviously, they're bringing back their own quarterback as well. Their own 2 quarterbacks, I guess, depending on which one that you think should play. So I think Michigan's going to have a really good offense. Their question mark is going to be on the defense. I think Michigan State's defense will be improved from last year, and their question mark is going to be really on the offense. Because last year, when Kenneth Walker wasn't doing Kenneth Walker things, their offense.
I wasn't surprised with where I saw Michigan. I figured they'd be right around top 5, number 6, just outside of it. I was surprised how high they had Michigan State, considering losing Kenneth Walker and how much of our offense he really was and how bad our secondary really was. But seeing that Peyton Thorne's coming back, and last year completing 60% of his passes for over 3,000 yards. Between that, his passing and running the ball, he had a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio for the year, 31 touchdowns total, 4 of them were rushing to 10 interceptions. And obviously getting Jaden Reed to come back is a big part of this offense as far as for pass catching abilities. And then the transfer portals replacing our transfer portal running back, whether it's Jalen Berger, whether it's Jarek Broussard, it's 2 guys that are different, but have both shown abilities, one at Wisconsin, one at Colorado. So it should be interesting to see how they pick up when it comes to replacing Kenneth Walker, who the season he had was incredible. And you're not going to replace it, but you can certainly try and do the best you can to give your quarterback all the help. It's going to be more on Peyton Thorne this year than it was last year, but if the running game can be consistently decent, we should have a pretty good offense next year. And then, like you said, with our defense, the secondary was just abysmal. Amir Speed coming from Georgia. He did play in the national championship team, but he did lose his starting gig on that defense, and it was a really, really good defense. So we'll see. But he does have connections to Tucker. Tucker was there when he signed with the Bulldogs. He was in his second season as Georgia's defensive coordinator. So there's that comfortability in knowing what the player can bring. Obviously, Mel liked what he saw out of Amir back then. And who knows, maybe he ends up making a real difference in our secondary. We had one pretty good secondary player last year with the transfer from Alabama. Didn't really make our secondary great, but at least we had one guy we could count on. Be nice if we have more than one this year. But Considering how bad our defense was and the turnaround at very important positions for us, at least, because running back was really, really important for us last year, and we saw how bad the offense looked in the Peach Bowl without. So I understand, and I'm happy with where they have Michigan State. I'm stoked we're inside the top 15. I didn't think they were going to have us that high. And then with Michigan, again, Cade McNamara coming back, didn't have a bad season. They didn't ask him to do much. They really relied on their running game more than their passing game. And you're going to have that battle again, and you're going to have the fans again fighting over who should be starting. Should it be Cade or should it be JJ? And good running back situation, just like you said as well. And Michigan, obviously, we know how well they are at recruiting. So they're going to have players replacing what they lost in Hutchinson and Ajabo. You're not going to immediately replace it, but you have players that you can piece in there to try and make up for the loss that those two players brought. It was right where I thought it was. The surprising thing for me was how many freaking Pac-12 teams they had up in here. You got Utah at number 8. You had Oregon inside the top 15 as well. You had USC right there at 15. 3 Pac-12 teams inside the top 15. It's just funny to me because none of them end up being there in the end. Just something happens with the Pac-12 where they end up beating each other, and none of them are there. And then obviously some of the other surprises, like expecting a great season out of Notre Dame, a great season out of Baylor as well. I'm curious to see, obviously, how this plays out. But getting that early Notre Dame Ohio State battle, a top 10 battle, definitely helps for marketing purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame's going to be pretty good. They're usually a pretty good football team, and right now having them top 5, I don't know about that, but it's also a team that we've seen make the college football playoff twice already and made a national championship game. Before that, back in 2012, where they got smashed on by Alabama. So, I mean, they have a recent track record of being one of the better teams in the country when all is said and done. And then in Ohio State, who comes in at number 2, right, an early top 5 matchup to start the season off, and it will give those two teams a good barometer of kind of where you expect them to be, right? Or at least they could. Last year we had Clemson and Georgia as that real big early season matchup, and Georgia won, I think 7-3 or something, like in 10-3 maybe, and there was 1 touchdown scored by Georgia, and it was on the defensive side of the ball, a pick 6, and their offense didn't score. And then Clemson, we knew the season they had was it 10-3, which is a really disappointing season for Clemson, but they still got the 10 wins. And then Georgia obviously got things together and won the national championship. So not super predictive, but there are things that you can take away from those early season games. Not so much with the teams here. Michigan's non-conference schedule has been mercilessly made fun of. Colorado State, Hawaii, Connecticut, they're not going to face a test. I mean, they go to Iowa in week 5, which is probably their toughest game at that point. And then Michigan State, they play Washington in week 3 at Washington. So maybe a little bit of an early test there, but Washington wasn't any good last year. Anyway, maybe they'll be better this year. Who knows? And then as far as the rest of the top 25 goes, like I said, there's probably 4 teams that you can look at and say, I know these teams are going to at least be good, whether it's Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia. I don't even know who number 4 would be, right? Like Oklahoma, maybe USC with Caleb Williams or something, with Lincoln Riley there. But then you have, again, the next, honestly, 20-25 teams where I don't think you could slot them in each other's position.
I was surprised seeing Clemson
a whole lot
where
of
they
unknown,
are, because DJ
really like outside of
did not set the world on fire the way people thought he would at Clemson last year. They expected it basically to just be Trevor Lawrence went out, DJ, they went in, and Clemson just keeps rolling as usual. Well, the number of guys playing in the NFL right now with a Clemson alumni tagged to their name is ridiculous over the last 5 or 6 years, and it's hard to keep that turnover going. Not everyone can be Alabama, but DJ Ongole had some struggles last year, and if another year, obviously, he got better as the season wore on, but he never really just was like, wow, like he was coming in out of high school. It was a whole lot of wow. So I was surprised to see they had Clemson that high in this preseason poll. Obviously, these preseason polls, you never know which way is up with these, and half the teams in there are going to be frauds, and the other half are going to be actual contenders. But I was surprised by that. So I guess they're expecting that DJ makes quite the leap for this upcoming season and has settled in as the starting quarterback and is able to really perform at the level they need him to if Clemson's going to get back to what Clemson's been the majority of the last 6 or 7, 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Clemson found themselves in college football playoff contention. The ACC is pretty weak, as we see with the lack of ACC teams here, right? You have Clemson. The next ACC team that you have to go down and find is NC State at 13. Pittsburgh's in there at 16, but they lost their quarterback and their best receiver. Miami in there at 17. Wake Forest at 19. But again, like even once you get down to 15 or whatever, you're kind of just throwing darts at the board at that point, right? Michigan State, I hope they can replicate last year, but they're 14. If they went 8-4, I wouldn't be totally shocked. And then if you're telling me Wake Forest, again, coming off a really good year, I think they themselves probably won 10 or 11 games. If you're going to tell me, again, that's a 7-5 or 8-4 team, I kind of wouldn't blink twice at it. It's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And once you get outside of that top 5, even here, Texas A&M at 7 seems premature. I know they've had some really good recruiting classes, but those recruits aren't like full-time college football players yet. You know what I mean? Like they still need time to develop their game, and maybe in a couple of years, if they keep buying their recruits like this, they'll be even higher in the list. But right now, I think 7's pretty sturdy for them, and then. Would you be surprised, like if the top 4 here?
Well, all I know is that
at the end of the season,
polls coming out.
Hey, Ryan Griffin here. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of Griffin and Bass. Be sure to give us your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to click the bell to receive the latest notifications from DSN and subscribe for breaking news, community blogs, polls, contests, and other content.